Order, and welcome to today's meeting of the Science, Innovation and Technology Select Committee. Today we are examining the future of science and research funding in the UK, following concerns expressed directly to the committee as well as generally on the news of significant cost pressures at the Science and Technology Facilities Councils, and following our questioning of UKRI's chief executive in February. Now, we have two panels this morning, but before we go into our first set of questions, I'd like to place on record the committee's thanks to all members of the research community who have taken the time to contact us ahead of today's session. We're grateful for your engagement with our work, and we'll do our best to reflect your views in our questioning this morning. I'm going to ask members of the panel to introduce themselves the first time they're asked a question, and our first question will come from Daniel Zeitner.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning. I'm Daniel Zeitner, a Member of Parliament for Cambridge, and it'll come as no surprise to you that these issues are causing huge interest and concern in Cambridge, and I think the number of people attending the committee this morning reflects that level of concern. And I think we're going to be looking at how we got here, but also where we go from here. But to start with, I'm going to ask you, when did you first become aware of the cost pressures facing STFC, and did the news take you by surprise? And perhaps I'll ask each in turn, perhaps starting with Professor Heymans.
Hello, thank you for your question, and thank you for inviting me here today. So I am the Astronomer Royal for Scotland at the University of Edinburgh. Usually for these sort of things I am representing the fabulous astronomy community in Scotland, but today it's my great honour to represent the entire UK astronomy community, because our other Astronomer Royal is of course conflicted on this question. So your question was, when did we first start learning about these cuts? So I first became aware of it at our National Astronomy meeting last summer, when Professor Dougherty came and started to talk about the cuts. And already some cuts have already been implemented to our grants line, which supports research and innovation associates. We're looking at already a 30% cut in the number of those associates, postdoctoral researchers, technicians and engineers. At that time, the numbers weren't being floated. We thought maybe 10%, maybe. But it wasn't until January that it became really clear to us exactly the level of these cuts that are genuinely catastrophic and will be devastating for the UK astronomy community and indeed my colleagues in particle physics and nuclear.
Thank you. I think what I'll do is I'll take an opening comment from each of you before pressing you a bit harder. So I'll come to Professor Butterworth, and if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm a Professor of Physics at University College London. My name is John Butterworth. I'm a particle physicist, experimentalist. I work at CERN on the ATLAS experiment there. And until March last year, I was a member of STFC's Advisory Council as well. So actually, to your question, I knew something about cuts from that experience. So that predates the appointment of Sir Ian Chapman, in fact, as UKRI. It was clear at that point that there was significant cost pressure and cuts to the overall STFC budget. There was a 5% cut imposed on STFC's core budget, and we could see that there were problems coming at that point. And that budget, I remind you, includes both running of facilities and funding grants in universities in our areas, excluding the international subscriptions. So it's clear there were going to be problems, and that's why we've already had over 15% cuts in the grants in astronomy, nuclear and particle physics, and why the theoretical physics community has suffered already, as you'll hear. That it was going to get worse, we didn't really hear until Christmas, where there were two major projects in nuclear physics and particle physics that were cancelled from the infrastructure fund just before Christmas, which was a big surprise to those of us who were no longer in the loop, as it were. And then there was a letter from Michele Dougherty in February outlining the fact that we should prepare for 30% cuts, which again was a surprise at that point. We'd heard rumours, we hoped they were not as bad as they were, but that was the confirmation that things were, as you say, existentially threatening. This is catastrophic. The level of cuts can't be sustained by this kind of community.
And Dr. Williams.
Yes, I'm Dr. Simon Williams. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Institute for Particle Physics and Phenomenology at the University of Durham, which is a UK national centre for particle phenomenology, which is theoretical particle physics. I work on simulating particle theory using quantum computers, so quantum computer applications to high energy physics. And I'm representing the Early Career Researcher letter, which has now over 1,100 signatures. From an early career researcher point of view, we found out essentially through rumours, and then as a theorist, mainly our communication was that there are no postdocs on offer in the UK for theoretical physics, and we can talk about that in more detail as we go through. But then it became very clear in town meetings with the SDFC that these cuts were going through, and then the communication from Professor Michele Dougherty about the cuts to 30%. But apart from that, ERCs mainly got the indication that these cuts are coming through the fact that there are no positions available for postdoctoral research in this country.
Very good, thank you. So I think what I'm hearing from all of you is that there was some awareness that there were cost pressures building up. Do you feel that they were being managed? I mean, it seems that it suddenly hit a point where the action was very drastic. Perhaps Professor Butterworth, I mean, obviously you've played different roles in this.
Yeah, I mean,
what is your reflection on how we got to that point just before Christmas?
So I think there were clearly changes in the way STFC was regarded, I would say, by the ministry. It was seen as, it was given extra things to do by the ministry, and it was there was a significant pay rise for scientific civil service, which was long overdue, and I was argued for hugely. And STFC Council, amongst others, was arguing in favour of those things, and that it should happen. Unfortunately, the funding to match those did not come. It had to be taken out of the existing budget. And while that's something you can manage, and we did with our eyes open, it takes time to manage. I think what happened then is that those pressures were transmitted onto the 15% or so of the budget, which is the university-funded grants, which sits right next to the 85%, which is labs and facilities, and there's a multiplier there, and this all happened far too quickly. So I think let's be clear, there are cost pressures in our science. There always are. There are projects that are overrun, there are inflationary pressures, there are delays in schedules that add cost. But those are things we're used to managing, and they, within an approximately flat cash or indexed allocation for PPAN, those are the things that their science boards, advisory structures manage the whole time. What we're talking about here is actually a cash cut in that. And there's no way a kind of over-ambitious build-up of pressure leads to a cash cut unless that's coming from somewhere else. And I believe that's coming from outside of the PPAN area, the particle physics and nuclear area and astronomy area. So I think there were mechanisms in place to manage the pressures within the particle, astro and nuclear physics line. I think then there's been additional pressures piled on that which are not manageable from externally.
Either the other panellists want to comment on that?
I think John's done a brilliant job there.
When Sir Ian Chapman was before us a few weeks ago, he cited a number of issues, currency fluctuations, high energy costs and so on. Do you have a view on whether that is what is causing this? You're beginning to introduce other things which feel like there are a number of factors.
It's a very complex environment, and there are many things. I think the factors that Sir Ian mentioned are at play. However, over the last few years, the programme has dealt with the energy fuel crisis from the Russian invasion of Ukraine, for instance, the COVID situation. All of these things perturbed the system. I believe they were manageable and being managed, and I don't think that the area that we three are particularly concerned with, which is the particle physics, astro and nuclear, which is done in part with the labs in partnership with the universities. So the Astronomy Technology Centre in Edinburgh and the Particle Physics Division at the Rutherford Lab, for instance. I don't believe those factors are really a driver there. To some extent, the salary increase may be. International subscriptions, the dominant one is actually my own lab, CERN in Geneva, the biggest one. It's more than half of those that's indexed in such a way that if the currency fluctuations take it up, the GDP goes down and you pay it flattens out in the end. So I don't believe that's a fundamental driver of this. Now, I think the fact that STFC manages big labs with a lot of employees and the costs of there have gone up, and I think justifiably, but I don't think that's been taken into account when Surian talks about the STFC budget being more or less flat. That's building into it this big inflationary effect there, which is now being transmitted to places where it was not generated.
In terms of the actions that you were asked to model, perhaps I can go to Professor Heymans first and then comes to Dr. Williams. I mean, these seem like huge,
absolutely huge,
numbers to model. Do you feel that was this a theoretical exercise, or it seems to a lay observer from outside, an existential level of change being asked for, rather than just what would be the impact?
No, yeah, absolutely. So right now, I'll talk about the astronomy side of things, and you two can share the particle and nucleus. So we have 48 projects at the moment across the UK, astronomy projects that are currently writing strategic plans of what they would do with their international projects if they were cut by 20, 40 or 60%. And the media has focused a lot on CERN because you already know what's been cut through the infrastructure fund. But there hasn't been much attention on or much thought about what's being cut on the astronomy side of things because we don't know yet. So I just wanted to share with you just briefly some of the big ticket things that are at threat here from these potential cuts. So there's the Vera Rubin Observatory. It's one of the world's biggest telescopes with the world's biggest camera. We are making a movie of the universe, capturing asteroids, exploding stars, and we're processing a quarter of the data. These sort of cuts means that we won't be able to process that data. That is both a problem for us being able to exploit it, but also a major problem for the whole international collaboration. You know, who else is going to process this unprecedented volume of data? That's damaging to our international reputation. The fact that we're even talking about this is damaging for our international reputation. We talked about subscriptions with CERN. We have the subscription to the European Southern Observatory. Now that isn't a threat because it's an internationally agreed agreement, and it's the same with CERN. It goes with GDP. But what we're at the moment really excited about is the extremely large telescope. Best way to picture the extremely large telescope is to imagine a giant football stadium. It is actually that big. And very exciting, in the UK, we are building instruments for that telescope that will be able to resolve the chemical composition on planets outside our solar system in our quest for the thirst for life, to see if we can find life out there. Cuts to the instrumentation not only withdraw us from that ability to make that genuinely game-changing science, it also really interrupts that amazing talent and skills pipeline. This is really high-end technical engineering. We train a lot of fantastic engineers to build these instruments. You know, even just a 20% cut puts all of that at risk. Very quickly, Simon's Observatory, this is going to be asking the question of how did our universe begin and how is it going to end? Really big science questions. We just shipped out 2 of the 7 telescopes out there at the cost of 17 million. Very proud that the UK has invested in this. These STFC cuts could mean that we can't operate them and they would sit there being completely unused, a waste of all of our resources. UK square kilometre array, regional source centre, we can't cut the construction because that's under international agreement, but we can cut our ability for UK science to access the data from this amazing radio telescope. And I would be remiss to not mention gravitational waves, cataclysmic black holes colliding in the distant universe, rippling the fabric of space-time, which we can measure right here thanks to UK expertise, really unique expertise that has gone on to improve retinal scanners, water table monitoring, security and defence. You know, that is just the tip of the iceberg of the things that are at risk here. So you're right, this is existential, and even just a 20% cut is devastating. And these are big ticket items. The only way that these devastating cuts can actually be made would remove a good number of these really big, high-profile science cases, and that's just the first 5. There's a whole lot of other ones underneath there. Robotic telescopes, our other fleet of telescopes in La Palma. There's a whole number of things, solar observations, lots of different things going on that we're really proud of. And it makes me very sad that I'm here today, because 2 years ago I talked to your committee in an inquiry where we celebrated UK astronomy, and we highlighted that this was really world leading and an amazing gateway into science. And now I'm here hoping to convince you all to help us convince UKRI and STFC to reverse these really, as you said, existential cuts to our field, and indeed our colleagues in particle and
Very
nuclear.
powerful point. I'll pass back to my colleague to pursue the questioning. If that's helpful.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and thank you very much, Professor Heymans, for bringing, for the inspirational description of where we are, and also for bringing the space-time fabric into the Select Committee, which we always like. Samantha, I think you had some further questions on this.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for coming in today. It's much appreciated. The cost pressures that are cited, do you think that UKR and STFC should sort of been made aware and acted upon them earlier? And does it feel fair in light of an increase in science budget?
I take that. Okay. Something's gone wrong somewhere, I think, because I think there's an advisory structure that should have communicated how catastrophic this was, and everything that the Minister has said implies to me this was not the intent. I mean, if the government decided we're doing too much astronomy, we're doing too much particle physics, that's one thing. That's a different argument we'd have. It doesn't seem like that's what the government is saying. And therefore, somewhere there's been a communication failure. Either the people on the ground haven't communicated to the next layer up, or the next layer up hasn't listened when they've communicated. And it's a great shame that we've got here for that reason, I think. I don't know, I'm not on the inside, I don't know where that happened, but it does seem to me there's a system failure there, to be honest, unless this was secretly the intent all the time. And I don't actually, from what I've heard from Lord Valence, I don't believe it was.
Maybe I could say something on the delay. Delay is already having a knock-on effect, even though potentially we're told that these cuts aren't set in stone. But a perfect case of this is theoretical physics, where we have a internationally defined transition window, essentially, where institutions can't force a postdoc to accept a position until the 31st of January, but essentially after that, all the positions are kind of allocated. The UK has now missed that transition window, and so we've gone from essentially a steady approximately 30 postdocs a year to essentially 0 coming in October in theoretical physics. Now, are we just the first ones? Because we have this very hard deadline, which is internationally agreed, so there's also our international reputation on the line there, that we defaulted on this. Are we just the first field to be hit, obviously, by these delays, or will this knock on into other fields is the big question. And these delays alone are damaging the field now. This isn't hypothetical, this is happening now. And theory is a good use point for that.
Can I add one more comment? Is that okay? Sorry, you asked about should it be, but another piece of evidence that I think it's unintentional is that and this is coming back to Simon's point about the international reputation, we have memoranda of understanding signed at departmental level with our international partners, which we're now not able to meet, and that is really unprecedented. So I don't think that can have been intended. I mean, when we've just, for instance, got the first UK Director General of CERN for more than 30 years, to damage our reputation because we're not meeting these memoranda of understanding is unheard of. Are there any consequences of not meeting that? Is it like in breach of a contract, or are there financial consequences of not? These are not legally binding things. These are the way international science works. In the funding agencies say, by best efforts, we will deliver this, blah blah. It's a trust-based system at some level, but they're signed and they're known of. And if you damage your reputation by not meeting them, it makes your partnerships much harder. So I don't think there are legal consequences. But for the science, it either means one of our international partners has to pick up the cost, or the science doesn't happen. And either way, the UK loses leadership.
That's very distressing to hear. We have Michele Dougherty here later for the next panel. It seems to me that what you are saying is that what you did not hear about the cost pressures, you heard about the cuts first. So there wasn't a discussion. Sorry, just to say that you're nodding. So there wasn't a discussion about cost pressures that's been happening over the last 2 to 3 years.
No, that's not true. Within the SCFC Council, we were very aware of the cost pressures within the PPAN programme, and there were plans in place which would
within the PPAN programme,
yeah.
but not overall not to this level of the
not to this level. No. So I think the internally generated costs. Yes. They would have led to hard decisions, but you would have been able to manage them.
We want to look now in more detail at the impact on CERN specifically, and Professor Butterworth, you're working there now. The committee's very first, in fact, so far only, international trip was to visit CERN, and the committee members were impressed and astounded, really, by the level of scientific discovery that was taking place there. I think, Freddie, you have some questions on that.
So my name is Freddie Van Mille. I'm the MP for Henley and Tame. I think, first of all, just to take a step back, if that's okay, for the benefit of anyone looking at this from a wider perspective, can you just maybe explain what CERN is and kind of why our relationship with it is so important, and the funding arrangements we currently have?
Absolutely. So CERN is the UK National Lab for Particle Physics. We were a founder member. There are most European countries are member states, and we're around 15% of it. It's where we do all our particle physics at some level, or it's certainly our energy frontier particle physics, and a lot of the detector development and technology that comes with it. It was founded in the 50s to try and rebuild European science after the Second World War, and it's incrementally got itself into a position where it's not just the UK centre and the European centre, it's the world centre for this. So we work with US, Chinese, Japanese, international partners there. The flagship experiment there at the moment is the one I work on. It's the Large Hadron Collider. It was there was a Nobel Prize for the Higgs discovery about 10-15 years ago now. The time flies. But what we've been doing since then is exploring the energy frontier. So there are other aspects to particle physics. I shouldn't say we do all our particle physics there. That's not quite true. But without being a member of CERN, you would not be a player in particle physics at all, I think is definitely true. And what the Large Hadron Collider is doing now is the human race's window on the energy frontier, which means you can, with energy, you get resolution, so you can think of it as the most powerful microscope we've ever built, looking at deep into the heart of matter as to what the fundamental constituents of nature are and what the forces are that bind them together and make them lead to the universe we see around us. So that's what CERN is, and it's a great place to work, and the UK is a very well-respected partner there and currently leads it, with Mark Thompson being the Director General.
Can I also say that the UK is very heavily involved in doing theoretical calculations? So the IPPP and in the Institute of Particle Physics Phenomenology, one of the leading groups that does theoretical calculations, which are then used to model processes at CERN.
Yeah, without which the experiments wouldn't be as interesting. Yeah.
Thank you. And maybe you could just go into as well then what the impact of the UK withdrawing funding from the upgrade to the LHCb will be.
So I'm not a member of that experiment, but the UK is the single biggest contributor, along with Italy, actually, on that experiment. This upgrade was there to take advantage of the fact that we're already upgrading the accelerator there for actually my experiment and CMS, the two ones that discovered the Higgs. So this is an upgrade of one of the detectors on the Large Hadron Collider so that we can fully exploit the facility that CERN provides by colliding these protons. It was instigated and led by the UK scientists who lead that experiment at the moment and have in the past. And I think without the UK contribution, that may not happen. It will certainly be de-scoped at the very least by a long way. But it's in jeopardy now because the UK had a very strong position with the infrastructure fund that was promised. We were able to go and build a coalition, a collaboration where other funding agencies from our partner countries were joining in and were contributing, but they were joining in with something that the UK had led on, and now the UK has pulled the rug. That puts the whole thing in jeopardy.
Thank you. For my own curiosity, what was that upgrade hoping to discover or achieve?
So LHCb is a kind of more specialist experiment than the one I work on. It's looking at the rare decays of particles produced when protons collide, and the main driver of that is the fact that the universe at the moment is made mostly of matter, but mostly entirely of matter, apart from occasional bits of antimatter we make.
Dark stuff, John.
Yeah, well, the dark matter is out there. We don't know what it could be. All right, the bits of matter we know about. But the laws of physics are very almost symmetric between matter and antimatter. So, if those laws are at play in the Big Bang, it's very hard to see how we end up with a universe that is dominated by matter, not antimatter. So what LHCb is fundamentally aimed to do is to explore that by looking at very rare decays of particles that are produced in these collisions, and these asymmetries can be manifested in those decays. So there are other things too, but that's the main driver of that.
Okay, I'm going to nod and pretend I understood and go back to it later.
I hope I got it right. It's not even my experiment.
You're saying that without this UK funding, we may not be able to understand the origins of the universe, basically.
We may end up missing some very key data there, yes.
And then
all this long discussion about science, this is what gets people into physics. They are interested in the teeny tiny stuff that John and Simon work on, and our friends in nuclear physics who aren't represented here today. But also the really gargantuan scale. That is what gets people into physics, to study at university, but then they go out and do all of the amazing things like the innovation showcase that you heard earlier. And so to cut this blue skies area of research, which sort of genuinely is the gateway into this really important area for growth in our economy, this is really not what the UK should be doing right now.
Yeah, and just sort of finally then on this section, so what impact is this having potentially on our international partners? What are they saying about this potential cut? Does it impact how we're seen internationally?
Very, very much. I had a phone conversation with Kostas Fountas, who's the president of the CERN Council, on Monday. I'm just not going to repeat what he said about the UK, but it's really, especially given that there's a feeling that we had some rapprochement with our European partners after some quite difficult years, for obvious reasons, I hope. That the fact that the UK got a Director General appointed with support across the CERN Council of Member States, it feels a bit now kind of rude, or I'm putting it very mildly, that suddenly we pull the rug on one of the big projects that they're planning for the future.
Thank you, Michele.
Thank you very much. And yes, as you say, we remember the committee remembers the celebration when we had a UK-British Director General of a CERN, the world's leading programme, and to choose to cut funding for their upgrade the next year seems unfortunate and unplanned. Before we leave CERN, can I just confirm whether or not, in your opinion, Professor Butterworth, that if funding is available in 2 years' time, as Michele Dougherty has suggested it might be, would we be able to come back up to get back in and to continue it? The project?
First of all, that's a very big if, because it assumes indexation and it assumes that we don't do anything else, basically, if you look at the plans, the forward plans.
Right.
But I think anyway, this is such good science, we would by hook or by crook try and get back in there, but we would not be leading it anymore. If it happened, it may not happen anyway. If our international partners pick up the tab, then the UK will look for a way to get involved, I'm sure, but at some much lower level without the leadership that we have now.
And is this research that's happening in CERN happening anywhere else in the world?
No.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Adam.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. And before I start, I should say that prior to my election, I spent 5 years as a postdoc research fellow at the University of Nottingham, so I very much understand the plight of yourself, Simon, and indeed many of those joining us from the gallery today. I should also say, for the record, I maintain an honorary associate professorship at Nottingham University, just to declare that. But Simon, I want to focus on some of the reactions to this news from the research community more broadly. So just so that we're all clear, could you just give us an overview of why early career researchers are particularly exposed to the cost pressures here, both at STFC and more widely in the community?
Exactly. In case anyone doesn't know, a postdoctorate position tends to be a fixed-term contract, and usually it's 2 years with a possibility of extending to another year. And there seems to be a party happening. And as you put pressure on this system, this is first absorbed by ECRs because of essentially we are a short-term investment for a university, whereas other pressures are more difficult to absorb these funding changes.
Can I just interrupt to explain that I think there was some dancing or something happening outside in Portcullis House, and that's why it's a bit noisy and it may be difficult to hear our witnesses. So I'm afraid you may have to speak up. It's not intentional on our part.
I'll project. So really, because we are this volatile part of the system, we absorb the pressure first, and there's a real concern from all of the signatories on our letter that actually this isn't acknowledged, and we are talking potentially about cuts which would remove a whole generation of early career researchers. Once you remove that generation, rebuilding that is very difficult, and also rebuilding trust from international partners that actually the UK is a stable and international researchers that the UK is a stable science funding country. It is very hard to rebuild as well. And actually ECRs tend to be where the economic growth comes from. Spin-outs often come from ECRs. And so cutting at this level really would be catastrophic to UK science, and essentially you're killing the tree by removing the roots. So you might not notice it for a while, but it's going to take time to...
I think that point you make is really important. You're essentially, if you think of the career as a pipeline, you're taking a chunk out of the middle of the pipeline, exactly, aren't you? And there's damage along the way. You mentioned the letter that you coordinated. I want to know, since you published that letter and sent it off to UKRI DCIT, how much engagement have you had with UKRI and DCIT as a result of the letter?
Yeah. So as a result of the letter, we did meet with head of UKRI, Professor Ian Chapman, and Professor Michele, Dougherty, head of STFC, yesterday afternoon. We're at 4 p.m. and finished at 6:30 or something. So we're still processing our thoughts on that. But we had an engagement there, and we'll be releasing a kind of a statement from us after that. Okay. And we've also had correspondence back from Lord Valence, potentially, basically saying that nothing's been decided. This is all still up in the air, but ECRs are feeling the pressure now. And as I say, I keep coming back to theory because that's what I am an expert in. But it is almost too late to fix the theory problem this year. We have essentially no STFC funded, consolidated grant funded postdocs beginning in October, and that's the whole year that we're missing. And this is also having effects across PPAN, and we hope that our letter and our correspondence will come out that measurements and mechanisms are put in place to make sure and salvage the ECRs that are in the country, and don't not let what has happened to theory happen to other parts of PPAN.
Thank you, Simon. Pulling back a little from the specific issue that we're talking about with this explicit funding change. From my own experience as a research fellow, you touched on this earlier. a lot of fixed-term contracts, a lot of short contracts, a lot of very heavy pressures on, maybe you spend 6 months bedding in, a year doing a bit of research, and 6 months trying to find your next contract, right?
Exactly.
I'm recognising smiles around the room from the cycle of what it means to be a research fellow. There has been a shift in this government's approach compared to previous governments towards longer-term funding settlements. Yeah. I was wondering as to your opinion on where the research community is at the moment following those kind of changes. Has it had any tangible effect yet, or do you see it having any tangible effect in the future?
Okay, so this is talking essentially where the consolidated grants are going from being 3 year to 5 years.
Exactly.
Yeah. Having sat at the back of these town hall meetings, and as an early career researcher, you don't tend to pipe up too much in these. I don't think this will necessarily have an effect on the postdoctoral pipeline. I think often universities will still be offered 2 + 1 years, I think. And I don't know how a longer postdoc would fit in with the pipeline to then becoming a permanent professor or permanent position. Because if you often you're expected to move around. Postdocs and are very, very mobile and internationally mobile as well. If you are in one place for longer, that might not have the same effect that was desired for when you want to go for more permanent positions. But I agree that it would be nice to make the postdoctoral market less volatile and more job secure. Yeah. I don't know how to comment on how that would then integrate with the rest of the pipeline.
Fine. Thank you, Simon. And building on that, really, you touched on postdocs often being internationally mobile. I certainly felt a pressure. Yep. I never succumbed to it personally, but I felt a pressure to move institutions at least, or even internationally. Obviously we're making efforts to change things domestically, but given the international landscape, do you think the problem is unsolvable? Is it always going to be there as a pressure, or are postdocs going to be able to put roots down if we change policy? And then I suppose the follow-on from that is, what does that new policy look like? Yeah,
so potentially one thing to mention with these the current proposed cuts is that there is essentially the talent is going abroad. Often you'd say, okay, well, if a load of highly trained early career researchers go into industry, brilliant, but that talent will go abroad and the industry will move with it. Specifically in quantum computing, I know I work very closely with IBM, for example, who are putting money into working with theoretical physicists to show how their devices work. In terms of if a postdoc can start to put roots down, I think that would only come if there is real long-term security. And currently, I mean, the pressure on a postdoc to move is still there, and potentially may not be a bad thing, and it's an exciting thing to be able to move. But we are a very volatile part of the pipeline, and I don't know how that longer contracts would integrate into the rest of it.
Thank you, Simon. Final question from me, Chair. Catherine, John, I just wanted to see if you wanted to make any reflections on points that Simon's made. Do you share these concerns? Do you want to add to that? Maybe Catherine first.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll have heard at the Lords Committee briefing meeting yesterday, Lord Valence saying that there were no cuts. This was, it's the plan that they're working through it. But with respect, I would beg to differ with him if I look at the grant line that funds our research and innovation associates, so postdocs like Simon, technicians and engineers. That has already seen a 30% reduction in the total number of postdocs. And we've had flat cash over more than a decade in that pipeline. And I loved your analogy of cutting off the roots for the trees. This is the lifeline of our whole field. Sorry, the door's just open with beautiful music coming through. It really is the lifeblood of our field. And not everyone stays in academia. You know, if I look at my own research group and everyone I've worked with and trained over the years, a third of them now have very senior leadership roles in AI companies. And you know, you might not think, well, how does an astronomer know anything to do with AI? But you know, physics, astronomy in particular, was early adopters. We've been using AI since the late 90s, and it's the easiest thing to cut because it's so volatile, because they are the short-term contracts. STFC have this impossible position, as far as I understand, that they have been given these budgets in bucket 1 and bucket 4. Bucket 1 has a lot of things that they cannot cut, the international subscriptions, the QR. I'll put aside I do not think the QR funding should be in bucket 1, but anyway, there are lots of things in bucket 1 that cannot be cut. So all that is left is this P-plan science, of which the postdoctoral line is the easiest one to cut because they're on these short-term contracts. But it's certainly within the astronomy community, prioritisation exercise after prioritisation exercise says we must preserve the grant line. Yet we've never seen any increase. It's always been flat cash, and in this last round and the one that we're going through right now, we've got this 30% cut. So these cuts are here, they are now, and I was very happy to hear Patrick saying that he really thought that curiosity-driven research was very important. He didn't want to cut it, but it has been cut in STFC already, and there's plans to cut it even more.
Thank you, Catherine. John, any further reflections?
Just add very brief, everything's pretty much been said. Just to say on your comment about moving towards longer and more stable positions, the most recent thing was that the 4-year consolidated grant that Particle Physics Experiment runs under was issued as a 2-year grant because of financial crises, and within that, the postdoc positions were only funded for 18 months, leaving the universities to pick up the leftover bit, which, believe me, universities are not rolling in money. So that may be the intention, but what's happening on the ground is very different.
Okay. Thank you all.
Maybe one last small comment. Often ECRs, we feel that we are not necessarily involved in these discussions, and I feel if there is going to be a change to the postdoctoral pipeline, then bringing early career researchers into that discussion would be beneficial, because we are the ones who are living it. Yeah.
Extremely important point, Simon. Thank you all. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Adam. And yes, extremely important points. And I think the committee will definitely want to follow up on the impact specifically on early career researchers and the number of postdocs which are available, as that seems to be a good measure of and their length of time. I also want to commend you for your tolerance in giving such informed and moving testimony, while it appears we do have a dancing lesson outside in the main hall of Portcote's house, and it shows your ability, your resilience, and your ability to communicate under all kinds of different pressures. Now we're going to go to Lauren.
Lovely, thank you, Chair, and thank you everybody. And just for declaration of interest, what do I declare? I'm a visiting research scientist at the Francis Crick Institute and a board member at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, and have experienced a lot of what Adam has described in the postdoc merry-go-round, and just, so do you believe the situation with FTFC is unique, or is this being exposed to other councils across the Nine?
Do you want to?
Okay.
You can start, I'll follow up.
there are unique aspects about STFC.
Yeah.
In that it has such a large number of scientific employees, it runs the big facilities, it also is responsible for the international subscriptions. Recently, by the way, European Molecular Biology Lab was added to STFC's portfolio, which is, again, nothing to do with particle physics or astronomy, but it's our international commitments. So it's and it was added because STFC can deal with internationals, and it makes sense. It's a good idea. That's unique, okay, about it, and those things have to be funded. The point is, STFC is delivering all of that on behalf of UKRI, on behalf of DCIT, on behalf of the country. It's not doing it on behalf of particle physics, astronomy, and nuclear. Okay, it's paying CERN on behalf of us, but so that is the unique aspect, I think, and I think there needs to be more of a recognition in the system that we're delivering the light sources and the neutron sources and things and the molecular biology labs on behalf of the other research councils, and I think that dynamic is not managed well within UKRI at the moment. I'm not sure it's just the problem with the current management or where it came from. It's not my role to say that, but it seems to me unfair that this tensioning of that lot, again, putting it all in the same box and saying that's flat cash, and then from that you pay to run these facilities, these internationals, and then give the leftovers to us to do particle physics and astronomy. Doesn't seem right. So in that sense it's unique. I think on the other hand it's a bit of a test case, because this is the curiosity-led bit of STFC, and if Lord Valence is, as he says, wants to protect curiosity-led science, this is the canary in the coal mine, I would say. So can he protect us?
Yeah, no, grand. Thank you. Catherine, did you want to say?
Yeah, so we are starting to see things coming out. So the Royal Meteorological Society put out a statement of concern because NERC has grounded its aeroplane, which it uses for all sorts of climate science. So that happened just in the last few days. That's a £50 million upgrade that's been grounded. So I think we are because it's been such a shock to all of us at the levels of the disproportionate cuts that are falling on our research field. We are certainly here in front of you today to talk about it. I'm not sure it's flowed through to the other research councils how this new bucket organisation system where UKRI dictates how much money goes in each area. I'm not sure how that's flowed through, and I really appreciate Dame Chi that you really asked Sir Ian Chapman to really flow that through, and I saw the Sankey flow pot that he sent you. That's certainly some of the answers. But you know, there's a lot happening, structural change in UKRI at the moment, and it's just going at such a pace that what we've been told is an unintended consequence is happening and causing a lot of uncertainty in our community. And uncertainty is the last thing that you need. You know, scientists, talent goes where the money is and where things are certain, and things are very uncertain here at the moment, and so the talent is leaving, and that's not good for UK PLC.
Can I just build on the points that you've been raising there about pausing grant applications, and so in MRC, I think a BVSRC, they're also been given this pause for a few months and then it will reopen. Can you describe, I mean, obviously I'm really sorry to hear about your aspect of it and they're going down from 20 to 0, but what does that mean in real life, as it were?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, the pauses I think potentially hadn't taken into account internationally agreed timelines. For example, the theoretical physics has a cutoff, and on the ground that translates into people not being able to get a postdoc in the UK. And if that money comes back later, then potentially it's too late. And for this round and this recruitment round, and I think so that the delay is just as damaging as any cuts and the uncertainty in the field, and this uncertainty is not there in other countries.
So in theory, you'd write an application for a project. This is what we want to do. You then, we have to wait now because we can't submit it. So we're going to wait. The money runs down because you're not getting mortgage, all that sort of stuff. Then we submit it to the funding research councils. Now on the last, so we've able to see the scorecard of like the turnaround time. It's from 4 months to 7 months processing time. So add into that.
It's a huge amount of time between, and fellowships as well. I mean, for example, you can apply in August and you don't learn if you've got that position until May.
Do you think, this is probably a bit of a loaded question, sorry, that actually, yes, this UKRI needs to pivot and needs to change and to go to the buckets thing, but until this is kind of settled, there needs to be some sort of either extensions to what is currently there so that you can adjust, because fundamentally the buckets may change, it may be different priorities. You need to rewrite and reframe your projects. You can't do that not earning any money and just or being somewhere else. So would that be a proposal that would be interesting?
Just say something. Yeah, so I agree. I think from what I think the communication has been to early career researchers has been, this is changing, and now we're going to forecast it, and or maybe not forecast, but now we're going to do the consultations. I mean, that change the consultation potentially should have been done before the change, or before even the changes were announced are going to happen. I mean, even if it's just potential, the uncertainty that has been injected into the system has been catastrophic.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're asking also about other research councils like BBSRC, MRC, and I don't work in that community, so I don't know for sure, but I do from UCL. I know that colleagues are very nervous and are watching what happens with us, actually, to see what might be coming down the line for them, but also see opportunities. I think there isn't like unified opposition to this policy change. It may be that we're headed to a better place, but the transition is being handled terribly, and I think that's something that needs to be dealt with. And it's not just communications. I know Surian has been very critical of his own communications, and that's true, but I think it's more than just communication. I think it's the timescales that you're alluding to. I think I'm also a little worried that, as Kathleen said, for instance, we do things like AI and quantum in our area, but we're all in bucket one. So if all this money goes to, do we have any route into bucket two from PPAN? I'm not even sure. We don't know. That's the problem. So, and I think my colleagues in the life sciences and medical research and things have a lot of are worried about the change coming. They're not wholly negative about it. I think it may be that this is a much more transparent and better way of doing things, but you're losing the old before you know what the new is, and that's never a comfortable situation to be in.
So just to kind of a final point, so if you were a member of this committee and who we have coming on to our next panel, what sort of things would you like us to ask? And do you have any suggestions for how we could improve the transition period?
I would like to know who made this decision and based on what evidence. So with what we hear from UKRI is curiosity-driven research is protected. That's what we want. That's what we need. And STFC is a unique problem and needs to balance its budget. What we've heard in STFC town halls is that UKRI has dictated the budget, which is slightly increasing for STFC, but they have also dictated how that breaks down into the buckets, and therefore the only way to resolve that is this 30% cut on our area, because the other things in bucket one cannot be cut. And so there's a real conflict between what we're hearing from UKRI and what we're hearing from STFC, and so I'd really like to hear because we don't know who we should be petitioning at the moment. One piece seems to be passing the buck between each other, so that's what I would like to hear asked.
I absolutely echo that, and I would also like to know who's going to make the decision. So yesterday Lord Valence was being asked about and said statements like PPAN needs to be sorted out. This is absolutely a problem. It was recognised as a particular problem, and apologies for being parochial about our own science and my astronomy and nuclear physics colleagues, but this is urgent. We have international meetings coming up at the end of the month where our name is going to be mud if this isn't sorted out. So not only do we need to know who made the decisions, we need to know who's going to make the decision about whether this can be fixed, and that includes that's basically about, I think, transitional stuff, which may not be ridiculously costly to fix the initial damage, and then we can work out where we're going after that. So not only who made these decisions, but who's going to make the decision that either they can't fix this or they can, and this is how it's going to be fixed.
And essentially maybe just one comment on, I agree entirely with the other two, but one comment is, if these buckets are going to be made available to us, how is that, who wins the grant, how is that chosen? Because you're pitting up very different areas of science. For example, if you use quantum computers for quantum field theory simulations against potentially cancer research applications, for example, that's a huge breadth of science. If it's all in the same bucket, exactly how do you win? But my question would be essentially what mechanisms are in place to ensure that we don't have this attrition of early career researchers.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're running out of time, but a couple more questions from colleagues on the committee, and it's a very is a key area, and now that the dancing has stopped, I do want to just mention that I'm very aware that we don't have anyone from the humanities or the social sciences in giving evidence, but I'm also aware that there are experiencing significant cuts to postdoctoral positions as well. It has been suggested to me that that's part of a move away from humanities into more investment in the sciences. But I just want to confirm, Dr. Simon Williams and Professor, that it's not your experience, that your experience as someone in the sciences is not that you're gaining more funding from the humanities, for example.
Exactly, yeah, I mean, hopefully the evidence I've given today shows exactly the contrary. We are seeing in PPAN an attrition of early career researchers, and yeah, potentially this is happening, like you say, across the board of all higher education. Yeah.
Which is strange, with a commitment to an increase in science funding given by the government. Okay. I think Martin and then Freddie had
thank you, Chair. So I'm Martin Wrigley. I'm the MP for Newton Abbot. Unlike my colleagues, I'm not experienced in research science. I'm an engineer by training, software architect largely by profession. I don't understand the numbers. Overall, the budget's going up. Overall, there's more money spending, and yet you guys are talking about devastating 30% cuts. Thank you for laying that on the table for us. So who's winning whilst you're losing?
It's a really excellent question, Martin, because we also do not understand the numbers, and that's part of the problem. If you go back through the council minutes for STFC, so council used to be sort of in charge of STFC before UKRI took over. They're now sort of an oversight board. They didn't even have the numbers. Their December 17th meeting quotes that there will be a major shift of funding from curiosity-driven research to priority areas and targeted programmes, but even at that point, council weren't aware of the numbers, and this part is not transparent. So from our side, all we know is what we've been told by Professor Dougherty, that roughly the budget in our area needs to decrease to 70%, and that's what we're working towards at the moment, looking at what has to be cut to meet that. But where the money's going, we have ideas. John's already talked about the increase in salaries for public servants. So STFC employs the most because it runs all the facilities for the whole of UKRI. There's the Diamond Light Source, for example, which is a really big major facility, primarily used by EPSRC, but also by the Medical Research Council, Biology Council, hardly used by PPAN scientists at all. Our suspicion is that's where the money's going, but without the numbers, we just don't know.
Thanks very much.
Nothing to add to that. That's exactly, we don't know.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. And final question to Freddie.
Thank you. Yeah, if I could just build on some of the ideas we've just been having. I think, broadly the buckets that have been laid out by Lord Valence seem to indicate a better or a greater focus on value and return on investment for UK PLC in terms of focus on, for example, university spin-out, so that we can be getting more value in the UK and investment potentially in things that are closer to commercialisation that can support employment, industry in the UK. And I think, generally speaking, I think that's probably a good thing. But do you think it's maybe a false equivalence to say that curiosity-driven work isn't driving value and isn't driving employment and benefit in the UK? And how would you say that you can capture more of that in the work that you do?
I completely agree. This is partly what I was alluding to before, and Catherine said before. We work on these priority areas as well. Mm-hmm. My goal is to understand the fundamental forces of nature, but I'm using the tools that can also be used elsewhere. I think you work at the Crick. Crick was a physicist, right? These things move around. So we're part of the ecosystem, which is kind of the national sovereign capability to do these things. Mm-hmm. And physicists are spinning out, and astronomers are spinning out all the time into these other areas. So there is an important distinction in that the goal of my work is not the spin out. The goal of my work is the Higgs boson or something, right? But the tools and the people I work with and the students that work with me who go and do other things, and my colleagues at UCL are working on other things, and the universities and the national labs are our kind of sovereign capability to do this stuff. And it's an absolutely essential component of economic growth. And there's a place for targeted growth, picking a winner, saying, right, back this, and I'm not saying, that's absolutely vital, and Lord Valence is correct, I think, in his ambition to carve out the kind of the heat bath of curiosity stuff that will hopefully be sparking these things, and then make sure they're used properly and we get the economic benefit in the UK from them. Totally the right idea. But the buckets where most of the one that he calls curiosity-led is actually going straight to the universities who do all of this stuff. They don't just do curiosity, really. So it's a QR element is the biggest chunk there. I think there's a massive underplaying then of the grants that also do curiosity-led are then being squeezed, and that's what we're seeing. That's why we're here, I think.
Can I also make a comment potentially, very quickly, about there is a connection to industry in the UK being interested in what we are doing. And if you are removing essentially a cohort abroad, then that industry will go abroad. And there's a symbiotic
That's the last question, but I know Kit wants to.
I just wanted to emphasise that point, if you could. Right. So my concern is, and I'm sorry I was late. I was hosting a big data health breakfast thing. I worry that they're looking at the sort of peep-hand science and not at the people. Right, so particle physics developments can take decades, right? But all those people that go through the research culture of particle physics go to AI, quantum, photonics, all these other things, right? So it's not necessarily that you're just generating the particle physics breakthrough, you're generating the people that are doing all these other breakthroughs, right? And that is where the investment should be seen. It's in the capability, not just the science.
And we are losing early career researchers where we've invested a huge amount of money in these people. If you think about PhD, postdoctoral schooling, all the way through university, and we are just letting them go abroad.
I can give
the contention is, you would agree if we would say that cuts to this kind of long-term basic research will actually impact on the human capacity we've got to do with this other more retail, faster-moving stuff.
100%. I can give you a really concrete example of this. We have a doctoral training centre in UCL that was started by STFC funding, quite visionary a few years ago, on data-intensive science, with astrophysics and particle physics leading it. And that's trained cohorts of students now with industrial partners who are co-funding studentships. STFC pulled the funding 2 years ago. The thing is carrying on UCL money and industrial partner money, which is great. In one sense, that's a success story, but it's about half the capacity it could be if it still had the backing of STFC.
We don't.
And those people are in huge demand, right? Those are the people you're talking about.
Sorry, we have to end now, but I do want. There's a really important point you've made, Kit. How could we capture that? What question could we ask? Or is it the numbers of doctoral students?
Yeah, is there an FTFC kind of alumnus program? Says, these people doing amazing things with quantum actually came through an STFC research program. So you can kind of map the network of expertise that was created in particle physics or whatever it might be.
There's definitely a very good CERN alumnus program, but it's not. That doesn't capture STFC.
Maybe you could write to us about how we could capture that, or a question that we could ask, or a figure that we could be giving, so that we can capture that, and then we can see the impact.
Give us 5 real people.
Yeah, I've been in contact with some people.
We can easily do that.
Quantitative or qualitative? Okay, great. Sorry, we've run over time, but as you can see, it's a area of real interest to the committee, and I know to the wider audience in the room here and across the country. And so a really huge thank you for your testimony. And Professor Heymans, you talked about coming here to save astrophysics and to say astronomy. We are very concerned about the evidence that you've given, and we will be continuing that in our next panel session. So thank you very much, and order. order, and welcome to the second panel in the Science, Innovation and Technology Select Committee's session on science funding. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Professor Michele Dougherty, and I shall ask her to introduce herself as part of the response to my first question, which is, so when did you first become aware of the cost pressures facing STFC?
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to all of you today. Brief summary of who I am. I'm a planetary scientist. We build magnetometer instruments which fly on planetary spacecraft. So had a spacecraft go to Saturn, and I've got one on its way to Jupiter at the moment. I was based at Imperial College for over 35 years. Have been a member of the PPAN community that entire time, so I am feeling the pain. And for 6.5 years I was head of the physics department as well, so I also have an understanding about the concerns of heads of physics. Recently, in January of last year, I was seconded into the STFC chief exec role. And on joining STFC, that was when I became aware of the projected financial shortfall.
So when was that exactly?
In January 25.
Thank you.
I had been a member of STFC Council before that, and I was not aware of the shortfall as when I was on Council. And it was very clear to me when I joined that STFC essentially would not be able to afford itself going forward unless we did something. And so, to be frank, it isn't what I signed up to, but how can I not want to help STFC reshape itself and afford itself? In some form or another, they've supported my research for the last 35 years, and I know how important their success is to the UK research and innovation landscape. But in my role, knowing that we have a shortfall, I can't stand by and allow it to continue. I'm very well known for my transparency. I'm sometimes told I'm a bit too frank. But I alerted both STFC staff and the science community last year that there was a financial problem. I said to them I was not aware of what the ultimate impact was until the spending review allocations were decided towards the end of last year. But I did say to them that we had some difficult choices in front of us, and I wanted to work with them on that.
Thank you very much, and it's clear that you're making the point, and I'm very pleased to hear it, that you come from the community whose funding you are now managing. You were aware of a shortfall when you joined, when you took on this role.
Yes.
What was the shortfall that you were aware of?
It was of order 100 million, potentially up to 150 million. But
Right.
it took me some time to get an understanding of what the size of the shortfall was.
And where did that shortfall? What had given rise to that shortfall?
I think from my perspective, if just almost a single answer to that, but there are lots of other factors as well. It was an overabundance of ambition. There were too many new projects which were taken inside of STFC, but also launched within the science community, which our financial environment cannot sustain.
No.
When I say that statement, on thinking about it, it's our job as science leaders to be ambitious and to take risks. When we often don't know what the details of those risks are at the start of the process. But it's also the job of leaders to grasp the mettle and say, if they know we cannot afford it anymore, that we need to do something and reset our ambitions.
Thank you. I suppose my surprise is rather that the STFC is a primarily facilities funding. That was really important. The scientists that you're funding, and we'll come to that. Facilities are long-term things by definition. Yes. So the council responsible for funding long-term things should be able to do long-term funding. Yes. And you're saying that the council failed to do that to the extent of 100 million.
I am saying that too many new projects were taken on when there was not the understanding that they could be afforded.
I just find that incomprehensible for any sort of basic budgeting. Yeah, and I take it there were accounts during this time?
I can't talk to what happened before I joined. All I can say is what I found when I arrived.
I think you do, I'm sorry, but in terms of governance, I think you do have to talk to the position that you're in now,
yes,
and how that reflects what happens before. And in terms of the accounting for these new projects, and could you name some of the projects that were taken on that couldn't be afforded?
There are a whole number of new facilities which were taken on board.
Such as?
The Bowlby lab up in Daresbury is one of them.
Right.
But there was the understanding that there would be funding routes for those. That is my understanding of the situation. So new money was injected with an understanding there would be continued money for those facilities. So Bowlby was one of them.
Was that understanding given by ministers? You don't know.
I wasn't in post.
Perhaps will there be minutes of executive meetings, etc., which would identify that? So just to move on then, because whether we do want to understand what happened at that time. So Ian Chapman talked about cost pressures being around currency fluctuations, the Ukrainian war, I think, etc. But you're not mentioning that. You're talking about particular projects which couldn't be afforded.
So the overabundance of ambition is one of the factors.
Okay.
There are other factors. There were inflationary costs which came on to our baseline of costs. There were operational costs as well. Some of my colleagues earlier mentioned that we increased staff salaries, which needed to be done, but those were extra costs. So it was a combination of inflation, operational costs, and I think launching too many new projects unsustainably.
Right. I would have thought that many of the operational, I would have hoped, perhaps operational inflationary costs could be, if not budgeted for, then hedged in some way. For example, currency fluctuations can be hedged. In terms of as you're doing long-term budgeting now, I hope you are you including? Are you repeating the same mistakes? So there are things you're doing now that you weren't doing there to ensure that your long-term budgeting can be long-term.
Yes, if we don't put contingency into our budget,
it's contingency.
Then we will find ourselves in a similar situation in the future. So yes, we are putting contingency into.
I'm actually not talking about contingency. I'm talking about hedging for future costs. Such as like currency fluctuations can be hedged for.
Yes, so we are doing that as well. But I think it's also important to put additional contingency in.
Well, I agree, but putting in additional contingency is taking money from existing projects in order to increase contingency. But let's move on. I have a couple of other specific questions. Did you highlight the risks associated with these decisions to UKR? So UKRI leadership and to DSIT ministers when you found out a year ago?
Yes, I had conversations with all of the research councils and with UKRI and DSIT, and I described what I saw as the financial shortfall that was coming towards us. Yes.
And then, did you communicate that to the science community? Because we've heard that the science community heard about cuts, not about the extent of these financial pressures. So when you say you communicated it to the science community, what did you say to them?
So last year, before I was aware of what the actual shortfall was, because we were going through the spending review process last year, and so I did not have definitive numbers as to what the actual shortfall was going to be. But in community meetings, in council meetings, and in meetings with UKRI colleagues, I made it clear that we had some difficult decisions we would need to make, but we couldn't be clear about what they were and the scale of them until we had an understanding about what our spending review allocations were.
Right. Do you accept that the decision to pull out of funding the LHCb upgrade at CERN, which we've discussed earlier today, damages the UK's international reputation and standing?
It certainly has the potential to do so, and if we do not talk carefully to our international colleagues and describe to them the financial situation we're in, then it could. But I have made sure that I've had bilateral meetings with our international colleagues who are involved with CERN. We've also had detailed conversations with Mark Thompson, the DG of CERN.
Right.
Actually had a meeting with him and Minister Vallance and Ian Chapman and some of our colleagues. Mark is understanding of the situation that we're in, and he's also very concerned on the impact on LHCb upgrade. The way that decision was made is that was a cross-UKRI decision. There were, I think, 8 different projects that were up for infrastructure funding, and there was not enough money to fund them all. I recused myself from that conversation because I chair that committee because of the fact that we had 2 STFC projects within that committee, and there was a cross-UKRI decision that was made that we can't afford it now.
We've already heard from Professor Butterworth that decision has not been has impacted our international standing, and you're saying that it has. You're saying that you don't think it has because of excellent communication on your part. I mean, do you accept, that as a founder member of CERN, and given the importance of that upgrade, and giving a commitment from government for increased science spend, that decision must undermine our international standing and reliability?
It does weaken our standing, certainly. Can I just follow up, if I may? What it doesn't do is it doesn't undermine the commitment that we have to CERN. We pay £175 million a year subscription to CERN. We're the second largest partner in CERN, and we will continue to fund all the projects that we're funding at the moment based on the prioritisation process that we will go through over the summer. And I'm assuming we will come back to that process.
Yes, we will certainly come back to it. Many colleagues are keen to come in with questions.
Yes, no,
and before I just want you to say to the committee, as Sir Ian Chapman said to this committee, that UKRI's engagement with the research community had not been good enough. Now, you have members of the research community here in the room, and I'm sure listening. Would you accept that, and would you also share that view that your communication with the research community has not been good enough?
I think the way in which the news came out was not good enough. I was not happy with the way in which it came out. I was rushed into sending the email out that I did to the community, because I had an all-staff STFC webinar where I detailed to my staff the level of the cuts we would need to make within STFC. And one of my staff members shared every single slide with the media. That went out at the same time as I gave the webinar, and I had to then reach out to my community and let them know what we were going to be looking to do. So the timing was awful, and the comms, I was very distressed by those comms. It was not a good way in which to engage with our community on that.
I think that's very clear, and I appreciate your confirming that. Now, before I go to Daniel, I think I've caught a couple of people who would... Lauren, would you like to come in briefly?
Yes, very, very, very briefly if I can. So I'm interested about the governance.
Yes.
And so it sounds, and what it feels like, and I don't know if it sounds like, there's this medium-term financial planning which maybe you inherited a place which wasn't as it should be, and we're seeing deficit each year. But then that's been coupled with this new bucket framework, which is then forcing the choice between which different projects. Some are safe, but then that leaves the postdocs. So I'm just trying to understand then, who is responsible for the governance of A, deciding the buckets, and B, deciding actually that kind of medium-term financial planning. I think it was mentioned earlier that you're an advisory role rather than the actual decision maker, as it were, in SE.
Sorry, as far as the decisions that are going to be made as to what is cut. Within STFC,
yes.
I will make that decision.
Yep.
Within the PPAN grant line,
yep.
I have agreement from Ian Chapman that what we will do is the process we're going to go through in the next 3 months is we're going to have a prioritisation process which is run by our science board. They will engage with the community and they will then come up with an option space. We're going to be looking at a 10, a 20 and a 30% cut. We're going to look at that option space and we will then share it with UKRI and with Ian Chapman so that he is aware of what the impacts in that option space are. And so the final decision will be made at a UKRI level, but we need to give them all the information as to what the impacts are.
Who decides on the buckets?
The buckets, so UKRI decides the bucket structure, and in bucket 1, each of the research councils is responsible for their bucket 1.
Who decides what research is in bucket 1?
The research councils.
So you decide Diamond or whatever is in bucket 1.
Diamond is not funded from bucket 1, yes.
An example,
yes.
This is in bucket 1, we cannot touch anything to do with this. So you have decided what's in there, which then means what's left.
So our bucket 1 consists of the international subscriptions and PPAN grant funding and the project funding that is linked to PPAN work. So those are the three things that are in bucket 1. I couldn't think of anything better than things. Sorry. Yes. Yes.
We're talking about buckets. It's really bizarre.
Buckets. Yes. So those are the three areas that we need to be able to fund out of bucket 1.
And that has to be protected. So based on what the minister's saying about blue sky research, bucket 1 fully protected.
Yes.
They cannot be touched for cuts.
Yes.
But they are being touched for cuts.
Well, but I'm working to a financial envelope which is, worst case scenario, 70% of what we got in 24-25. So that's the email that I sent out to the community, that I need information from the community as to what the impact of that would be on the science that we can do.
Why is it 70% of what you got in 24-25?
That is going back to levels that we were at in 21-22. I can get the funding line to you. I don't have it in front of me.
But why when
that
funding...
is what we were awarded in our bucket.
That's not okay.
So UKRI is deciding the bucket amount of bucket for 1,
yes,
for 2, for 3, for 4.
Yes.
So it's UKRI that are moving how much money you've got to spend for the various different things. But you're deciding what goes into the different buckets.
But in discussions with us. So there were conversations over the last 6 months of last year during the spending review preparation as to where the funding would go. So we started to get insight into where our shortfall might be, but we couldn't share it with the community until it was formally announced.
Just you've been informed of a 70% cut in funding for your bucket 1 or for all. Because I'm not sure that I'm not sure that's what our understanding is. A 70%, a cut to 70% in your bucket 1.
That is the headroom that I have if I look at what is uncommitted as far as our grant money is concerned. So we have committed funding paying for existing grants already, but existing projects as well.
So in terms of the decision, but that is what UKRI are aware of. I'm just trying to say, can we describe this as a cut? You're describing it as a cut of effectively 30% in your bucket 1. That's what you're saying that the settlement is.
Where's the additional money going? There's been an uplift in money, so where is that going? Is that going to bucket 4?
So one of the things that really excites me about the new UKRI allocations process is the fact that there are these new pots of money. For quantum, there's £1 billion. AI, there's £1.5 billion. That is going to be multidisciplinary work, where all research councils and their communities can be looking to those buckets to get grant funding. And that, for me, is why UKRI was formed.
I think you've just brought in new buckets, haven't you? Oh, yeah.
They're 4 total buckets.
There are 4 total buckets.
Yeah.
So the quantum...
asked the question,
pale.
You asked the question where the additional money within the spending review is going to. There is a focus on multidisciplinary research, quantum, AI and compute. It's about £2.5 billion over the spending review.
Are those open now? Are that funding call, is that open?
Those are not
research ready to go?
Those are not open yet. What is happening at the moment is those areas are putting program boards together.
Right.
And those program boards will have members of each of the research councils on them.
How long will that take?
My understanding is that the governance of those is being finalised and business cases will be taken to Ian in the next couple of months. We need to get this moving because this is really one of the positive things that is coming out of the allocations process. So we need to get that moving.
So just a final question. Sorry everybody.
Daniel.
The transition period. So whilst we're waiting for this new money to come, which is sounds very exciting, there will be a stopgap of 6 months, a year for postdocs where they have to eat. Where will they go? And so is there any scope for this kind of transitional arrangement where actually you just extend what is currently there so that once we're ready, boom, they can then apply, they've gotten a good ground base where they can actually put some real thought, I mean they do really amazing things anyway, but into how we can achieve these amazing goals for the UK?
So one of the things I would like to do as part of our prioritisation process with
no transitional money.
Sorry, what I would like to do is to get an understanding from our science board and the community as to whether that would be something they would want us to put some of our money into to be able to keep postdocs going until these new opportunities open up.
Okay. I'm afraid we've already heard that postdocs are going abroad because there's no way to. They can't not eat for 6 months. So Daniel,
good morning. I have to say, I mean, this feels to me like a terrible mess. And you've said that you can't comment on what happened before your time, but from your description, it seems like a real governance failure. That it was, in your words, over-ambition was allowed. Well, over-ambition means vastly overspending resources that are available. Should you not be asking questions as to how that was allowed to happen?
I'm trying to solve the problem that I have in front of me.
If it happened before, what gives you confidence that the same structures, it sounds that council members weren't made aware of these problems. How can you be sure that won't happen again?
Because that's not the way I work.
Okay, but it's a structural problem, it seems to me. Now, people in Cambridge told me yesterday when I spoke to them that this is not a new problem, this allocation of resources, and Lord Drayson, back in 2007-9, set up what were called the Drayson partitions to try and protect against this kind of thing happening. Why have those been eroded?
They have been eroded over time. That is clear, and that is something that we as a community have been talking about ever since I joined the PPAN community. Is the concern as to where our PPAN grants sit compared to the rest of STFC. So one of the real positives about having PPAN grants within STFC is there's the very close link to our lab departments who help build the instrumentation, who build parts of the instrumentation for CERN and for some of the astronomy work that we do. So there's the very clear desire from our PPAN community to have that close link. But there is then this bleeding which happens when funds are short. What I would like to do is, as part of the consultation we do with the community, is to have an open conversation about where PPAN grants should actually fit. Should it be a separate research council? Should it go under the umbrella of one of the other research councils? Or is there a way in which we can make sure those partitions stay in place to enable us to protect PPAN science?
I understand the point, and I understand how difficult this is making UKRI actually work a decade after it's established. But given it was known that this fundamental structural issue was there, and people understood the consequences we heard from the previous panel. How on earth can we have got to this position?
All I can talk to is what I have been dealing with since I arrived.
Okay. Look, one final point on communication. Clearly, it hasn't been brilliant. I'm told there were town hall online meetings last week, which you handed to someone else to run rather than you did yourself?
I wasn't invited to them. I heard about them when they were going on because I was told there were comments in the chat that I wasn't there. I was not invited. One of the ones I was invited to, I couldn't do because I was running an interview panel and I asked if that date could be moved.
I mean, this is symptomatic of a breakdown of communication, isn't it, within the sector with key people. Yeah. I must be talking to the community. They are my community. One of the things I have done since you saw Ian Chapman is I've really been engaging with the community. We had a really good meeting with the early career researchers yesterday. They have given us some actions. For example, looking at the impacts of the cuts that we are going to make on early career researchers across the UK and how long it would take to then get numbers back up. That's one of the actions that we've taken. I also had a meeting with heads of physics, with Charlotte Dean, the chief exec of EPSRC, where we fielded questions and concerns from them for an hour. And one of the other meetings I had was with Minister Vallance and Ian Chapman and some of the particle physicists. So we're engaging with the community as much as we can. As soon as we get the pro formas back from all the project PIs, we will then start much more engagement with the community. Final question. I mean, clearly these were not the consequences that you and others were seeking. But given that we're seeing how it's playing out, surely you need to put in place some very quick measures to deal with them to stop causing this unintended damage.
That is why we need to share with UKRI, and the community will help us do that, what the impacts of these cuts are, so that it's clearly seen what the impacts are, and then a final decision can be made.
And do something about them.
Who's making that decision? Who's making that final decision? Will that be Ian?
I will take what the impacts are and what we can and can't do to UKRI, so to the executive committee and then to UKRI board.
And is that an expectation that further funding may be available? Or is that just for them to rubber stamp that? I mean, with all these pro formas coming back saying that a 70% cut or 60% cut will mean that it's unviable and all these projects will stop, is your expectation, I hope, that the further funding will be available, or is that just the outcome? Unacceptable as that seems to be.
Ian Chapman is very well aware that that is why the community is pulling these different option spaces together, is that they are hoping that he will see what the impact is and see whether there is a way to mitigate that impact. But I cannot speak for him.
I think, Freddie, you want to come in, and then I'm going to go
just two sort of themes to build on what others have asked. You're accepting responsibility for how things are spent now and staying within budget, and that's your job.
Yes.
Who was your predecessor?
My predecessor was Mark Thompson, who's the Director General of CERN now.
And how long were they in post for?
I think it was 5 or 6 years.
Does it stand to reason that they are responsible for the overspends that you're referring to?
That is where the overambition comes in.
Thank you. Secondly then, in terms of, we've heard as well that there's a shortfall in funding over the next period, and that you're expecting that to relieve itself in the next few years.
Yes, hoping we're going to get some headroom.
Is it sensible, therefore, to build a contingency fund in that period when you're facing shortfalls in funding?
You're right, I wasn't clear enough. We're not going to do that in the next couple of years. Once we start getting headroom, we are then going to put some contingency in. But it would be crazy to put contingency in now when we're potentially cutting some really good science. Yes.
What contingency do you have at the moment? None.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, no, not great. But thanks very much, Freddie. It's going to be Lauren and then Martin.
Do you want to go first?
Certainly. You clearly have a very difficult position. I just want to clarify a few things first of all. You talk about a shortfall between 100 million to 150 million. Is this real or projected? Is this actually a loss your organisation is making right now, or is this projected in your numbers?
Sorry, I don't know where the 250 million came from.
I said 100 million towards 150 million, which is what you said.
Sorry, I thought you said 200.
No.
I'm sorry, I misheard. So the projected shortfall we now have at the end of the spending review, which is 29/30, is 162 million.
So what is your actual shortfall today?
We are expecting that UKRI will help us out with about £50 million this year.
You're 50 million overspent right now,
yeah,
which is projected to increase to between 100 and 150 million.
Yes,
but you said in a worst case scenario.
Sorry, the worst case scenario I was talking about was if we would need to make 30% cuts to our PPAM budget. That is the worst case scenario. That's the email I sent out to the community saying that we are being asked to look at potentially 70% of what we were doing in 24-25. So that's why we sent the pro formas out asking those questions, so we can see what the option space would look like for us to make that 30% decrease across our PPAN budget.
So my questions come around, why is the 150, start again. Why is the 50 million shortfall of today, which clearly needs addressing, projected to grow 3 times? Where is that growth of loss? And rather than cutting existing work today, why are you not looking at cutting where those increases in spend are projected to be to get the bulk of your savings?
That is what we are planning to do, is we will take the bulk of the savings that need to be made by 29/30 internal to STFC, so within our multidisciplinary facilities and our national labs. So we will stop doing things so that we will be able to afford ourselves in 29/30.
Sorry, that doesn't answer my question. Why are you choosing to stop things whilst allowing other things to expand beyond the budgets that have been allocated to them?
That's what we will. That's what we're going to stop. We will not allow any expansion to take place.
So just to, I think I understand
Yes.
Martin's point. We've heard from postdocs that they are going to model 70%, 60% cuts. They haven't got increases in their costs, but they're being asked to model cuts, but they're not saying that their costs are going to increase. So why are you asking people who have not had increasing costs to make cuts?
Oh,
I think that's what you're saying.
Yes.
Martin.
Sorry,
Thank you.
I misunderstood the
Yeah.
question. Thank you. So within the PPAN envelope, which I described to you earlier, there are 3 different areas that we cover. One is PPAN grants, which helps cover early career researchers. The other is international subscriptions. And the third thing is projects that we run for PPAN grants. So Atlas, for example, on the particle physics side, some of the work that's been done at the UK Astronomy Centre, for example, the Moon's instrument that was delivered to Chile. Those are all projects that are part of our bucket 1.
Yeah.
Costs on the projects are increasing over the next few years,
Yes.
and because of those increases, we are therefore going to have to decrease our grant funding line to stay within the envelope.
That's exactly my question. That is the choice that you are making.
Yeah.
Rather than, so my question would be, why are you not controlling the costs on those projects? Because they are running out of control, clearly, by increasing their spend in £100 million.
We are partly doing that, and that we have been receiving pushback from the community for doing that. They're asking for additional money to run some of those projects, and we're saying we cannot do it. So there are some committed costs that we cannot get out of, but any new additional costs for those projects we're saying we simply cannot afford.
Well, that sounds sensible. The other question is, what is preventing you, since you have chosen what is in each bucket in moving some of the things from bucket to bucket, such as the quantum that you talked about, such as the quantum that we were hearing about being cut. Why are you not taking advantage of that new funding? Because overall there is more funding. So it comes back to the question that I asked the first panel, which is, they are losing and who is winning?
I do not have responsibility for those new buckets.
No, but you have responsibility to make sure that your organisation makes best access of those buckets and presents the best possible route forward to transition from one structure of funding to another. I worry, as an engineer, I've many times run foul of finance budget rules, having seen Network Rail not able to protect Dawlish by building an offshore wave-breaking reef because it's not on their land, so they can't spend money on it. I suspect you are falling foul of the same sort of budgeting issues, and it sounds to me, from what you've heard, through a thorough lack of understanding, so I couldn't be entirely wrong, sounds to me like you need to be more creative in your allocation of your expanding budget to your existing people rather than projects. Is that something you have considered?
It is something that I am considering, but because we still do not have clarity as to how those new areas of funding are going to be, how the calls are going to come out for quantum and AI and compute, there is nothing I can do in the short term about that, other than say to my community and my staff, there is real potential there.
I think you have to project upwards, because I think you're being too passive. From what you're describing, you're being too passive and you're accepting what you're given. Are you pushing upwards, saying, if we are going to actually make the move that we need to do nationally in quantum, I think we've already lost AI. I think AI is a lost cause largely. If we're going to do quantum, we need access to this so we can transition our existing people into this new source of funding.
Yes, thank you. Yes, no, that is a very good question, and yes, we are engaging with the responsible officers for those areas. We have ensured that we have STFC representation on the programs, on the program board, because we have so much expertise within STFC and within our PPAN community. Some of the staff which we are going to have to lose within STFC to be able to afford ourselves could very easily take up new roles in the quantum and AI areas. So that's why we need these two processes to be moving together so that we can keep the best people.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're coming close to the end, so I'm going to ask Kit's got a question, and then I think we'll finish up.
Sorry.
No.
I just wanted to ask a question. Just ask a question about just to pursue what Martin was saying about appealing upwards. Right, so it would be perfectly possible. I mean, maybe UKRI can't, given what we heard from the previous panel about the fundamental damage this will do to the kind of research environment and the development of expertise for wider promulgation in the science community, it'd be perfectly possible if UKRI wanted to cross-subsidise you, to say, look, this is a one-off structural problem, we could draw money. UKRI typically has a capital underspend of about sort of 1%, 20-odd million quid that they could put towards it. But there are other things that could be done, and I wondered what conversations you'd had with the department about, for example, reclassifying the subscriptions that you pay as international treaty obligations, so they wouldn't necessarily come out of the funding envelope. Now that would mean Treasury approval, but given the strong case that we've heard made about the foundational nature of this science, not just in terms of the science itself, but the human beings that are developed within that context. Have you had that conversation? Is there an appreciation of its importance at departmental and then Treasury level that would allow you a bit of creative accounting, to be honest with you?
So I am having that conversation with Ian Chapman, and I'm having that conversation with DCIT as well, because we work in lockstep with DCIT with our international partners as far as the subscriptions are concerned. And that's part of the outcome I want from the prioritisation process we're going to do, is what the impact is of if we keep responsibility for the international subscriptions, what the impact is going to be on our community. So that is part of the conversations that
and also there could be, I mean, UKRI's budget over the years has been sort of manipulated to ensure that the DSIT budget is fully spent, right? So I think last year or the year before they spent like 800 million quid more through UKRI than they were budgeted to spend, but that was because DSIT wanted to make sure they didn't have a return to the Treasury. So there's flexibility in there. So if you're having that conversation and it's resulting in 30% cuts and some of these, should we be saying to the Minister next time we get them in front of us, why did you say no to Professor Dougherty?
No one said no yet. This is part of the conversation. But I have been asked with my community to look at what the impact of the 30% would be. I need to follow through on that as I'm having those conversations.
Because I think from our point of view, I mean, although it's a lot of money, from the great scheme of the government budget, it's not a huge amount of money. It's a rounding error for the Treasury that's normally found. So there should be a creative way to overcome what you're telling us is a temporary historic problem rather than an ongoing structural issue. And that's where we're struggling a bit. So would it be possible, Chair, if you don't mind, Professor, once your conversations with the department and therefore by proxy with the Treasury are concluded, that you could let us know, because then we'd like to understand from the Minister why they've taken the decision to say no to you for the money that should be made available for something which we think is, or seems to be, we're being told, so damaging.
Yes, it always has been a concern that the cost of the international subscriptions is impacting on science, and that will be part of the
It'd be easy just to move it out, right? Reclassify it. It is an international treaty obligation. We've got to pay it whether we like it or not.
Yeah, another line and everything. So thanks very much, Kit. Lauren, you had a final
just finally. So it sounds like there's an awful lot of work going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
While that's happening, though, what is your message to the PPAN community for why they should stay?
That we are world class at what we do. We have had these financial resets in the past, and we come back stronger. We have a difficult year or two ahead of us as we get through this. I know that's not much comfort to our postdocs at the moment, but I have a vision where we will come out of this so much stronger. We will have a clear understanding of our costs. We will generate headroom so we can take on new opportunities. But I am doing the very best I can for the community, and please will they engage with the prioritisation process we're going through. I need to know what the impact is going to be so I can make that clear to UKRI.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks very much, Lauren, and thanks very much for that message to the early career researcher community, who I know, who we've heard from this morning, we know are very concerned. I think the message from the committee is that the extent of the impact on our existing science base, and we really mean scientists, early career researchers, is unacceptable. It seems, from what I can infer, and Kit mentioned, this is a temporary issue, and I have the impression you expect that the new funding pots, the 1 billion on quantum, etc., will be able to address some of the temporary short-term falls. And this is an example of doing the cuts first and the new funding second, which is causing real harm to our science base. So in addition to hoping that, or asking the community to work with you over the next 3 to 4 years till we get in a good place, can you give a commitment that you will look, as Kit was alluding to bring in funding to close that gap in the short and medium term?
Absolutely, I will. Yes.
Great. And the committee will look forward to holding you and Lord Valence and Sir Ian Chapman to account on the consequences and the success in that endeavour. Well, Professor Dougherty, I do really want to thank you for the time you spent with us this morning. I think we've put a number of very hard questions to you, just to that reflects, as you're aware, the sense in the community that things have been badly handled. We are incredibly concerned as to the impact on scientists and on our scientific base in these incredibly important areas. So I'm sure this discussion will continue. But for the moment, thank you very much, and order.